gosh darn it, I really love this book. Will you be a little confused this whole novel? Yeah, probably. I absolutely love this book. I want to read it again. I want to experience it again. Hey guys, I'm Abby. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be going over the books I read in March, and I gotta say, it was a really great month for reading. I read 6 books and 3 of them were included in a same series, which was the whole series, and I really enjoyed all my books that I read, and I can't wait to talk about them. But it was a really, good month of reading. I enjoyed all the books. It wasn't hard to get through any of them, and so it was just a really good month of reading. I really enjoyed it. I hope this next month brings just as good books. But for this video, I'm not going to go in order that I read them like I usually do, just because I read books in between the books in the series that I read. So I'm going to go over the series all together at the end, but I want to do the books that weren't included in the series first, so they're not in order of when I read them, but I don't think that matters really. But for the first book, I kind of have to take back exactly what I said I was not going to do in the last video. So the last video, at the end, I kind of talked about how I'm going to take a break from romance novels because I read so many in February. But things happen and you have to go back on what you just said. So I had a book on hold, a very popular newer romance book on hold at the library, and it finally came available, so I couldn't just let it go. So the first book I'm going to talk about is a romance novel, and it's The Love Hypothesis by AbbyElizaWhite. Going on the theme of taking back exactly what I said in the last video. I said I wasn't really into modern romances, but gosh darn it, I really love this book. It definitely was a lot better than the other modern romances that I read in February. I don't know what it was about it. It was very realistic, which I said I didn't like the realistic parts last month. I don't know. Maybe it was really just the writing of all of these combined and seeing the differences, but I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was very cute. This book tells the story of a girl who's in her master's PhD phase of college, and she's a really hard worker, and she's in science and she's in STEM, so there's not a lot of girls, but she's working really hard. But in order for her friend to start dating her ex, she just randomly kisses this guy, and it happens to be this professor who's really well known, but known to be a major jerk in the program. And the story goes on where they kind of have to continue this fake relationship. So this book is majorly a fake dating to real dating trope, which I thoroughly enjoy. But they get in a lot of awkward situations because everyone thinks they're already dating, but they're not. And so they have to do these really coupley type things. And so there's a lot of points where I kind of just laughed a lot in this book, and it made it really enjoyable. There was also some points in here that I related to, because in college, after college too, I was also a STEM major, and so being a woman in STEM, there was definitely a lot of points I related to in here that you kind of only relate to if you are a woman in STEM. So I did kind of like that part of the book a lot, but I had definitely heard a lot of hype about this book, and that's why I had it on hold for so long at the library, and now I kind of get it. I only knew the basis of the plot going into it, and so I still enjoyed reading it because I didn't know that much about it. And I definitely will look at this author's other books because I really enjoyed this one. For romances, for modern romances, as I said last month, I didn't really enjoy those ones, so hopefully I will like her other writings and kind of get more into modern romances. Not that that's really a goal of mine, but it is nice to find a little diversity. One difference I did find in this book, the perspective is only told from the girl, which usually I find that they tell it from the guy and the girl, at least at some points, but this was told all from the girl's perspective as far as I know or can remember. So that was a little different, and I liked that to an extent. It was a little refreshing. But yeah, I really enjoyed The Love Hypothesis. If you've probably seen this cover in this book a lot, so if you haven't got a chance to read it, I would kind of suggest it. It's one of the better modern romances I've read. I haven't read a lot, but I really enjoyed it, and now I'm kind of thinking about reading some more. But the next book I'm going to talk about, I absolutely loved this book. I want to read it again. I want to experience it again. I thought it was so cute and such a good story. Definitely probably gonna be one of my favorites for the year coming to the end. But that book was The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie O. This book intertwines a lot of mythology, and it's very like high fantasy, kind of surrounded by a love story. But I adored the characters in this book, and it was a lot of fun to read, and I think I ate it up in like a day or two. But like I said, I would totally reread this book again. I'm thinking, I read it in an ebook form from my library. I'm thinking about going and buying the like hard copy so I can have one, because I definitely think I will reread this book again. That's how much I really liked it. But this book starts off with our main girl, Mina, and she is jumping into the sea to go save her brother. She lives in a town that lives on the coast, and there's these big storms every year, and saying they come from the sea god who is like upset, and to be consoled they have to sacrifice a girl to be his bride to eventually find one who will stop the storms. Well, the girl chosen for that year was not Mina. It was the girl her brother is in love with, and so he steals away on the ship, which is apparently like deadly. So Mina jumps into the ocean and swims to the boat to like try to help save him, and eventually ends up sacrificing herself as the bride and like jumps into the ocean with this mythical dragon, and she's dragged into the like spiritual world of the sea god. So she ends up in this spiritual world, and eventually, or not eventually, like almost immediately, her soul gets stolen. And so she has to like go on this long adventure of like getting it back, and encounters all these different creatures and spirits and such, and eventually leads to kind of this love story that she forms with our main guy. But overall, I loved all the characters, and I loved all their interactions and relationships. And you have, you know, the main two people and like his best friends, and then she has all these other like spirits who help her out, and you find out who they are later in the novel. But I loved all the interactions and like the scenery and kind of like the action that all happens. I really liked the writing of this novel. It was a great storytelling and a great way to incorporate like these Korean mythology within this story, and I thought it ended well, and I liked the ending and how it all turned out. I don't know how much more I can like gush over this book, but I really enjoyed it, and I really want to go get a physical copy to have so I can read it again. But like I said, this probably will be one of my favorites for the year. It's definitely like a lighthearted, kind of fun story with really cute characters and great relationships, and I thought I thoroughly enjoyed it. So this was probably the book I would recommend the most from this last month that I read. Even though I liked all the books that I read, this was probably one of my favorites. So that was The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea. So the next book I'm going to talk about, I had heard a lot about, kind of like The Love Hypothesis. I had it on hold for a long time at the library, and I was finally able to get it. It's also the book my family chose for our book club, and there's been like a lot of hype around it, and I've heard like a couple different opinions on it. But that is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I think this book won like the best book on Goodreads last year, I believe, and there's been a lot of hype about it. It took forever. It's been on hold in my library for a long time, so I finally got a hold of it, and I can see why a lot of people like it. I did enjoy it, but I don't think I liked it as much as people kind of talk about it. I heard one person describe this as very like self-help, and I totally get that feeling from it, and I totally understand where they get that from. But this story follows the girl Nora, but it follows her life on this like one day, and then she eventually commits suicide, and she goes to this like purgatory place, which is the Midnight Library, and we find out that she has this chance to like read these books and like live her lives as if she followed this different path or different decision that she kind of regrets through her, like they call it her root life, which is like her main life. But she goes and reads a lot of these different books, kind of living different lives, and she learns something through each of them. And it kind of like shows kind of like where she shouldn't like regret these certain things in her life, or like she made this decision for a reason. And this is where it like starts to get like very self-helpish. Like you get these like big, I don't know what to call them, like life mottos really through this book. And I get where people don't like this book, because it can come off very self-helpish. So if you're not like in need of that, it's not really helpful. But overall, I did like the story in general without like the whole, you know, life motto part. I think the big hype was like if people like emotionally connect to what they're saying in this book or what she kind of goes through, I can see where they really enjoy this novel. I didn't personally feel that like emotional connection to it, so I did enjoy it, but I wasn't like attached to it. I guess I just enjoyed the story in general. I did feel like the girl, Nora, the main girl, she was very like negative, and I feel like in general I'm a positive person, and so definitely at the beginning I did not connect with her. I liked her more at the end when she got better, and kind of like one of the themes of the book is like just your outlook on life, and so I think that's where I differed from Nora, is like my outlook on life is kind of different from hers. She like shifts obviously during the novel, but it was kind of hard to grasp like her at the beginning because it's not the way I look at life at all. I felt like sorry for her, and it is sad that someone can look at their life so negatively and, you know, want to take it. And I know that's a big like mental thing that like people go through, but it was like it is like a very sad part in the book. Like she looks at her life so sadly that she doesn't think it's worth going through, which I know a lot of people suffer with in real life, you know. And that's where I think like a lot of people can relate, because they've had those really like deep, sad moments where they can kind of connect with what Nora was thinking and how she was looking at her life then. And so I do hope they like read this and like kind of relate to the points and like look at their life more positively. I guess one thing I did take away from this book that made me like it is that it made me realize like a good mental place that I'm in, and hopefully other people realize that, or it can help people get to that point. But then again, I've never been like that in like those grips of depression like Nora is in the book, so I can't fully connect to her in that way. And I understand some people can, and it's really great that there are books out there writing about it, and hopefully it can help some people. And I think that's why I get why people like this book so much, because they maybe can relate to it, and I think that's great that they can, and maybe get to that point like Nora in the novel where they see life in a much more positive light and want to, you know, live it. But yeah, overall I did like the book. I didn't, you know, connect with it as much as I think some people would and love it, but I did like the story overall. So I would still recommend it. Maybe you will connect with it more and really enjoy the book. There's a reason why there's so much hype around it, and it was, you know, voted as like one of the most popular books of like 2020, 2021. I can't remember what year, but that was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Okay, so the last 3 books I'm going to talk about are books all in the same series, and that is the Gilded Wolf series by Roshani Chokshi? I don't know how you say her last name. But I read this series throughout the whole month, and I really enjoyed it. I think I read each book like fairly quickly, and I had to read the other books that I've already mentioned in this video like in between to like break them up and kind of work through what happened in the book. But I really enjoyed this series, and I'll go through each book and what I liked or didn't like about each of them. But overall, I really enjoyed the series and glad I read them. So the first book is The Gilded Wolves, and this story is set in like Paris around the time of the Great Expedition, and I think that's like the late 1800s. And I heard someone else on YouTube describe it as like very steampunkish, and I totally get that feeling from it and where they get it from. But basically in this world, it's almost exactly like our world, except there is the element of the Babel Tower, and the Babel Tower is like this tower that was built in ancient times with these humongous bricks, and basically it reached the sky and you could like be closer to God. Like this tower fell like a long time ago, and these bricks are buried throughout the world and Europe, and so from these pieces of this tower comes the power of forging in this world. And forging can come in like 2 different forms. There's the forgers who can like make material things, like some of the characters, one works with metal and can like mold metal to whatever she wants, and then one works with like plants and can grow different flowers and kind of like arrangements of however he wants. And so those are like the material forgers. There's a lot of different ones. There's like fabric and, you know, plants and metals, and so they can forge like material things. But the other forgery, they don't talk a lot about it in the book because it's kind of like banned by the ruling order of the forgers. But the other one is like a mind forging, and so they create create like illusions, and they can like almost control people, which is why it's kind of banned. But they don't talk about that much. I don't think we ever meet a mind forger in the series, but they talk about it kind of a distant type thing. Not everyone is a forger, it's like certain people. But this novel follows a group of people, and some of them are leaders within this order. It's called the Order of Babel, who are like the leaders who rule over the powers that come from, you know, these tower pieces. But our main characters, I think there's like 5 or 6 of them. In the first novel, I think there's 6. But we follow this group, and they are working to like steal things from this order, and they eventually want to find like certain objects, and the like leader of this group is trying to get back his house title, which are, you know, the group leaders of this order, and he's working towards that. So they're like stealing things, and he's like trying to find information and get certain objects so he can eventually become the leader of his house again. So this book is based off this group of friends who have like made themselves family, and they're all very loyal to each other and all work together to like kind of come to a common goal. And so in this novel there's like a lot of action, though in beginning with this world building it is very confusing. I mean, will you be a little confused this whole novel? Yeah, probably. Like I was. There was always a little bit of confusion of like what was going on, what they were talking about, but it's enough where like I could push it to a side and like keep going in the story. Especially in the beginning, there was a lot of like what the heck is going on, because there's not a direct like explanation of these powers that they gain or this order that's in charge of them. So there's a lot of confusion in the beginning, but you just kind of have to like steam through it, and kind of the confusion lasts throughout the whole novel. There's a lot of or like the whole series, there's a lot of points where I'm like, what the heck's going on? Just because there's like a lot of action and you just can't understand what is happening. But if you can just get over that, the novels are really great. And like the points you kind of get over, or like eventually figure out what happened, or you get the main point of it, and so you can keep going. But in the first novel, they're mainly working towards getting back artifacts and trying to get to each character's trying to find certain things to get to certain points. Like one's trying to get back his house, another's trying to find a book to like save her life, one's trying to get illustrious and like join a certain group. But basically this first novel like is describing the world, describing the characters and their relationships and how they all met and what they all do. Some of them have powers, some of them don't, but throughout this first novel you create these really great relationships with these characters and how they interact. And then there's a lot of action at the end. There's this whole like battle sort of type thing with this secret house that was supposed to be dead but apparently is alive, and they're like resurrecting one of the stones from the tower, which you're not supposed to do. And then at the very end someone gets killed. So yeah, by the end, you know, you still have that like tiny bit of confusion, but you get the basic plot of like what's going on and like how things work. And then at the end it leaves you on this like big cliffhanger because someone just died and you're like, what? So it immediately follows into the second novel, which is The Silvered Serpents. And, you know, like I said, it picks up kind of right after the events of the first book, and so you get into the action a lot quicker, which is really nice and kind of makes it better than the first book, because you don't have to take that time of confusion and world building. But basically this novel is set, instead of in Paris like the first novel, this one they move to Russia and like Siberia, Russia. And like I said, the action kind of starts right away, and they're dealing with the effects of the first novel. You know, one of their family friends or like their group family dies, and so they're all coping with it differently. And kind of what happened at the end of the first novel, they're kind of working through what happened, and they all react very differently. Some of them good, some of them not, but it's like a very good show of grief through different people. So in the first novel you learn about this like secret house that is actually alive, who was supposed to be dead. And so in the second novel they're working towards finding this house and like where they've been hidden, and then finding their treasure that's supposedly in this like magical palace in Siberia. And the whole time what they were working towards in the first novel kind of shifts from the revelations of what what happened. And so in the second novel, they're working kind of towards this whole goal of finding this book. And this book apparently holds a lot of power to make people godlike or give them godlike powers. And so they're all kind of working towards this. And this also happens to be the book that is going to save one of their friends' life. So it's like really important to them because she's dying. And throughout this whole book, there's a little less confusion than the first book, but every once in a while it's a little confusing what is happening. But there's a lot of action, a lot of good like plot development. You also get introduced to new characters that kind of add to the story and you go to like or dislike. But in the second novel, there's a lot of character development and kind of regression, especially with the parts when they're dealing with grief. Some of them do handle it badly, and so you kind of see that. But at the end of the novel, they do end up finding this treasure, but then, you know, there's like this big plot twist again, and it has to do with the fallen house. They kind of reveal themselves and you find out the powers that someone has within the group turns out to be much bigger, much more important than they thought, of like becoming godlike from this book. You have to like have a certain person read it, and of course it's going to be one of the members, or like the main member. And by the end of the book, he kind of fake betrays them to like get on the side of the bad guy, but they don't realize it, or like half of them don't realize it. And so that's where the second novel ends, is like he betrays them, sort of betrays them, and like leaves them, some of them supposedly dead, and that's where the second novel ends. So like it's even kind of a bigger cliffhanger than the first novel. But overall, I did like the second novel a little bit more than the first, just because the first has so much world building and that like confusing part of like what's going on. It's a little harder to get into, but the second novel is really great because you don't have to do that like world building confusion part. But the third book again starts immediately almost after the second book events, and this is the last book I'm going to talk about for this month. But the third book is called The Bronze Beast. It's the last novel within this series. The first book was set in Paris. The second book was in like Siberia, Russia, and this time they move to Venice, Italy. So all three books have like really great settings for what is happening. But again, this book starts right off where the second ends, so you immediately again get into action of like what's going on and the consequences from the second book. And in the third book, they've like found this great like treasure to like make people godlike, and so now they're trying to find the temple, which is the only place you can play it. It's actually like an instrument, but like if it's played outside this temple, like the whole world is going to be like destroyed or something. So they're working towards finding this temple and where it is, and to like do that, it's like hidden in secret. They all have to like figure out all these like riddles and rhymes to like go to this party to figure out, to get like a map to find this temple, which they know it's in Venice, but you know, it's hidden in secret because it's this ancient temple that they're not supposed to go to. But first they kind of have to like work through their relationships, because in the second part, you know, at the end of the second book, the main character kind of betrays his other friends, and they have to really work through that and like their consequences, and they realize a lot of bad things they did in the second book. So there's a lot of character development, and like the main character, he goes like through the whole good to bad to back to good, and he like has to like gain back the trust of his other friends. And I think that's one of the good parts of this book. You see his like major character development through his like regression from the second into the third. He develops a lot, and like throughout the whole series are these relationships that each of the group members kind of work to like gaining, and it's kind of like minor plots of love stories, which is really kind of cute, and I really kind of enjoyed them. They weren't like major plots, maybe with the two main people, but there was also a minor one that was just really cute. I really liked their kind of like side love story. But you see all the characters develop and work through a lot of hard things and gain a lot of development. And definitely in the second and third book, there's a lot of action that really just keeps you going through both books. And like the end like major action sequence was definitely one of those points where I was majorly confused of like what was going on, because there's so much happening, and definitely more of the fantasy side was coming in at that point where I was a little confused, but like I just pushed through it, and like you get the basic point of what happens. You can move on towards it, but it was like a really great, I don't know, climax to the whole series. And then the ending was definitely a lot different than I was thinking it would be. But I did enjoy it. It was different than I thought it was going to be, but I liked where she took it, and it didn't like ruin the series for me, which I think happens a lot with some series or books, like, or TV shows. You know, the ending can really make or break it. But I did enjoy this one, and I did like how it ended overall. But yeah, I really enjoyed reading this whole series this month. If you can get over those like small bits of confusion, especially through the first book, I think you really enjoy this series. Has a lot of action, has a lot of great relationships and character development. I really enjoyed all the characters in this series. I think I read each book like fairly quickly, within like 2 days at least. So yeah, if you're looking into a new series to like get into and read, I would suggest this one. I finished the third book and I had to like take a few days off because I was a little depressed it was over, and so I really liked it. Yeah, if you can just get over the little confusion and like push through that, this is a really great series to read, and glad I picked it. But yeah, those were the 6 books I read this month, the 3 in the Gilded Wolf series, and then the 3 single story books that I read. I think all of them I gave like 4 or 5 stars, so it was a really good month of reading. But between the Gilded Wolf series and then The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea, those are probably my favorites from this month that I would recommend the most. I'm really hoping to continue like these really good novel picks throughout April. I think I've read 15 books so far this year, and so I'm doing really well on like my goal of reading, and hopefully I can keep that up going forward. But let me know if you've read any of these books. Some of them are very popular still right now and have been for a while. So if you read them, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. But I hope you guys liked this video, and I hope you pick some of these books to read in the future if you haven't already. But I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, if you want to be someone, why not be you? Bye guys.